or not we have no follow, they have the same reproduction strategy that a dandelion has, right? They just blow seed indiscriminately all over the place. And so they don't really care. So what we do is we take out some utility that arises from our comments, which is that they contribute to the latent structure of the internet, which is what Google and other PageRank aggregating sites use to discover what shape the internet is in. So nofollow removes that value and doesn't stop spammers, because spammers don't care. Like, my feeling is, based on the way that our forum was cracked, and it's been cracked more than once, is that there's probably someone somewhere who pays a bounty for every form that you have that can be filled in automatically. So it's just like, if you give me some code that will fill in a form and submit it somewhere on the internet, I'll give you $1. And there are programmers somewhere in the world working for dollars, grinding out form scripts, right? Nofollow has no bearing on whether these people do it. It's totally indiscriminate, right? And so the economics of spam are such that there's like, nofollow does no good, and it does some harm. And so I don't know why we'd use it. But no one asked me. I think our sysadmins are just sensible enough that they took it out too.
Yeah, because it would be nice, as you're the biggest blog on Technorati, because Google and they came together and just said, this is our solution to spam.
Yeah.
And like 2-3 years later, it's obvious it didn't work. So I think it would be nice for the big blogs to initiate, like, hey, we're gonna get together and do something about it in the other way.
It's a cool idea. It's among the many issues that I'm working on right now. It's probably not at the top of my priority. And it does have a little of, one of the things that we get a lot of at Boing Boing is something I call let's you and he fight. So, like if you meet someone belligerent in a bar, he might say, let's you and me step outside and fight. Except in this case, it's like, let's you and he step outside and fight. It would be great if you would go and have a fight with these other people about this. And, I've got fights with Google on like 9 different issues today. I don't need a 10th. I'm fighting with them about their public domain books, the DRM on their videos, their search retention, their data retention policies, their China policies. I've got like 7 fights with Google today, so I don't really need an 8th. Although I agree that this would be a good fight, and if someone made a petition, I might sign it.
Okay.
So more questions?
No? Yeah?
So one of the things I think you've done an amazing job at is walking this line between free and fee and giving away a lot of your content. But for other media companies, I'm wondering how you would abstract some of the perceptions that you have about what traditional media companies can give away to their audience and what they can't. Like making your books available online, I would imagine, gives white knuckles to a lot of traditional publishers. Bunch of other examples, I'm sure you can riff.
Well, so I think that one of the dramatic failures of copyright in the last 3 decades is the conflation of all creative effort into one copyrightable subject matter governed by one set of rules. So the same set of rules that are intended to protect the revenue models and creative futures of people who make $300 million movies also apply to people who make needlepoint patterns, and also apply to people who design multiplayer role-playing games, and also apply to people who do kind of performance art, right? So all of these people are presumed to have exactly the same needs and the same policies and the same legal framework, and it's not coherent, right? It doesn't make any sense. Needlepoint artists don't need the same rules that $300 million film companies need, and they don't need the same rules that record companies need, and they don't need the same rules that science fiction writers need. So I happen to have lucked into choosing a career that the more digital free copies you give away, the more money you make, because people buy books when they get free digital copies. And so I think that that if you are in the publishing business and if you sell books, particularly fiction books, but I think also there's pretty good evidence that even some of the stuff that they thought would never would be immediately replaced by the internet, like technical books. I think there's pretty good evidence that giving away free copies electronically just sells more books. And so that's a pretty good business model. It doesn't necessarily apply, I think, to music. I think that if you chose to be the kind of artist who doesn't like to tour, or if your muse took you into the kind of artist that doesn't like to tour, if your music doesn't lend itself to touring, you're probably like in the wrong business. I think that there comes a point where you say to people, you know, it's very nice that you want to do stained glass for the rest of your life, but no one's building cathedrals anymore. So even though many of us appreciate the aesthetics of stained glass, the cathedral industry has collapsed. And so maybe you could get a grant to do that, but like there's not a market for it anymore.
And so we're here in the world capital of scientific, technical, and medical publishing, right?
Yeah,
and there's
Elsevier. Yeah. So I think that, you know, if you look at what Nature has done, I think the Holtzbring people have actually pulled way ahead of the Elsevier people. I think if I were Elsevier, I would stop focusing on moral outrage at people using science for free, because that's not really consistent with the principles of the Enlightenment, right? If you don't publish it, it's just alchemy, right? It's like it's only science if scientists can read it, right? If scientists can't read it, if there's a barrier to reading it, it stops being science. So stop focusing on moral outrage for this and start focusing on the business case for subscribing to an Elsevier publication instead of getting that same science for free. So it's maybe easier to describe this from the other side. So I've met a lot of open science advocates who said things to me like, we want to enrich the public sphere, not the Elsevier, which is very cute, but I think it's wrong. Because I think that the point of doing open science isn't that Elsevier makes too much money or not enough money. How much money Elsevier makes has nothing to do with science. What has to do with science is how you apportion your funding to do the most science possible. So if you're a brain research institute and you can spend $50,000 this year on brain research or $50,000 on the Elsevier Journal of Brain Research, which one will do better science for you? Well, if there's a public library of science equivalent to the Elsevier Journal, don't give Elsevier the $50,000. Not because Elsevier has too much money, but because that's not the best way to do science. Your job is not to enrich Elsevier. So if I were Elsevier, I would figure out how to convince people not that subscribing to my journal is the best way to do science, because empirically it's not the best way to do science. If you're a science writer, if you're someone publishing a paper, having your paper in a journal that's more widely read means that you'll get more widely cited, means that you'll get more funding and faster attract to tenure. So there's no good reason to publish in an Elsevier journal. I would focus on the kind of stuff that Nature is doing, which is finding good reasons to use Elsevier products. And Nature has found all kinds of good reasons to use Nature products that involve social networks, things like doing a science food camp with Google, all kinds of stuff that makes Nature core to doing science, not making Nature into an intermediary that extracts funding that could otherwise be diverted to doing research. And that's kind of my off-the-cuff advice for Elsevier.
Great, thank you. So serve the community, it sounds like.
Yeah. Well, build a value proposition that isn't about... The Elsevier value proposition was you could have it in any color so long as it's black, right? You need to subscribe to science journals. We're the people who publish science journals. It will cost you $50,000, and if you don't like it, don't read what other people in your field are doing. That value proposition doesn't exist anymore, so find a different one, or die, right? The world doesn't owe you a living.
I also have a question. I see that Boing Boing published the handbook for cyber dissident from Reporters Without Borders. So I wanted to know if you have a policy to promote activism. And
absolutely. All four of us are really committed civil libertarians, and we believe in promoting values that are embodied in great documents like the UN Declaration of Human Rights and the American Constitution and Bill of Rights, Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and so on. So where we have an opportunity to do that through technology, we take it within the scope of our limited abilities.
Okay, so if there are any more questions, I'd like to thank you for
joining
us.
Thanks, guys. I have like 10 minutes, so I'll just hang around if anyone wants to talk to me, but I got to go in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so.